welcome back to my channel. My name is Rita and this is Rita's Stories. So if you've been following my channel, you'll know that I have recently given birth to a little baby. We've been adding to our family. So we have Fitz, our dog, which I don't think he's in shot. And obviously Peter and I, my partner and I. And now we have a little baby. So we've got a really nice family setup. I wanted to take this quick opportunity to kind of rattle through my labour story whilst the baby is sleeping next door. It'll be kind of a very quick summary, and I'll just kind of talk through mostly the highlights. The birth was a very quick birth, which is really unusual, they say, for my first labour. And I had such grand plans of like filming the birth and seeing me kind of progress through labour. None of that happened. Essentially, it was a very quick labour. Started probably about on Tuesday or Wednesday with mild contractions, which I dismissed as Braxton Hicks. So that's probably where I went wrong. They felt like Braxton Hicks. Even at the time when I was having them, I was like walking around, walking my dog, didn't think much of it, and I was just like, yep, Braxton Hicks, nothing wrong with that, that's fine. I've had Braxton Hicks throughout the second and third trimesters of my pregnancy. If you haven't seen my summary, I'll make sure to link it up here. But yeah, I just thought, it's fine. Braxton Hicks, fine. No, I know what they are. But then come Friday, I was experiencing contractions a lot more frequently, and that was a dead giveaway that I was kind of going into labour. But for some unknown reason, my mind was clearly in denial, and I was like, no, I'm not going to labour. And I was like having a good old chin wag on the phone with my friend, who I hadn't spoken to in ages, and they recently had a baby too. And I was actually needing to breathe through my contractions, and I was kind of leaning over the armrest of my sofa, kind of rocking back and forth and kind of breathing through the contractions. And at this point I was like, oh, maybe I'm in labour. Not sure still. And I don't know why, I just really was adamant that I wasn't in labour. I was just really in denial. And even that evening, I went over to my mum's house for dinner, and by then actually the contractions had stopped a little bit. And so I had dinner with my mum. I didn't mention anything about the contractions, and she didn't ask anything, and she didn't seem to think anything was different about me. So I clearly was fine and just had dinner as per normal with her on a Friday night. Then my partner and I went home after dinner, and we were watching the 10 o'clock news when I noticed, oh, the contractions have come back and ramped up a little bit. They kind of hurt now. And so I was kind of thought, okay, let's get the birthing ball out and I will kind of roll back and forth on that. That didn't really do anything for me. Instead, my partner was saying, why don't we just break out the tens machine? I mean, that's why we bought it, so let's use it. And at the time I was like, no, let's not use it. We need to save that for when I'm really in labour. Again, don't know what was going on with my head, but he convinced me, and sure enough, we broke out the tens machine. He stuck the sticky pads on me, and we had it to like a halfway setting, so we didn't ramp it all the way up. So about roughly halfway, and sure enough, that really did numb the contractions that I was experiencing in my lower back, which is what I was experiencing at that time. And it was amazing. I really recommend the TENS machine. It really does do what it's supposed to do for the initial early stages of labour. But then for me, probably after about 10 minutes of us putting the TENS machine on, the labour pains, contractions, had moved round from the back round to the front of my abdomen, and that's where it was hurting, and there was nothing I could do about that. So instead, my partner and I decided to quickly go upstairs, try and get some rest before labour starts, because that's what the midwife tells you, and that's what you learn on your NCT classes. in the initial stages of labour, try and get as much rest as possible, kind of walk through, breathe through the pain, it'll be fine. So we went upstairs about 11 o'clock at night, and I tried to get some rest, but I couldn't because the contractions were getting more and more frequent, but also a lot more painful. And at this point, the TENS machine, even though I was still hooked up to the TENS machine on my lower back with the sticky pads, but it wasn't really doing anything because the pain was all at the front now. And so I was just in so much pain. I was kind of like wriggling around in bed, trying to get comfortable, but I couldn't. Like from one moment I was curled up in a ball in like a fetal position on my side in bed. That wasn't working. Then I was kind of stretched out, arching my back and like breathing deeply. That wasn't working. Next I was on all fours on the carpet next to my bed because I kind of like rolled out of bed by then. And that was the only position that really kind of worked for me. On my hands and knees, kind of rocking back and forth, side to side, through the contractions, and obviously breathing through. But that was really the only thing that worked for me. And by this point, I was telling Peter, please, can we just call the maternity unit and get some advice on what to do and let them know how far I am along in terms of the frequency of my contractions. I did have a contraction timer on my phone and I was timing it, and I was about every probably 5 minutes, contractions, 5-6 minutes. And the contractions were about maybe 30-40 seconds at this point. But when I was talking to whoever it is that picks up the maternity unit phone, they said, no, this is my first pregnancy, my first labour, and that I would have hours to go, and that the best thing for me is to stay at home, have a paracetamol, and an ibuprofen, which I didn't know that you could do. I didn't realise you could take paracetamol and ibuprofen together. They said take them both at the same time and make up a hot water bottle and stay at home until, you know, I have progressed more with my contractions. So sure enough, I was thinking, number one, this is really not going to work. I have a hot water bottle for period pain, not for childbirth. But that's what they recommended. You listen to the professionals, and so that's what I did. And sure enough, I gave it about an hour and it didn't work. I was in so much pain still, and it was getting worse, and the contractions were getting closer and closer together. I had gotten to the stage where my contractions were roughly about 2-3 minutes apart and lasting about, I'd say about 50 seconds to about a minute 10 seconds, a minute and 10 seconds, or a minute and 20 seconds, roughly. And that's where I was at. I was in a great deal of pain. I was howling, making so much noise. The best description I can give you is I sounded like a woman possessed. I looked like a woman possessed. I was arching my back. I couldn't get in any comfortable position. I was moaning, I was groaning, I was howling. Oh my goodness. At the time I was thinking, my neighbours must think I'm being like murdered here, because I was making so much noise. I was yelling and screaming. I was just doing all the things my body needed me to do. And one of the things was my body wanted me to start pushing, and I knew that I shouldn't be pushing. It was such a weird moment where my mind is like, don't push, you shouldn't be pushing, the baby can't be coming out yet, the baby can't be coming. But my body was like, no, you need to push. you need to like expel this baby out from me. So it was like a fight between my mind, what made sense, but also my body, which is what I needed to do. So I was in the bathroom at this point. Peter was packing up the car with all the hospital bags that I had pre-packed for myself, him and the baby, and the snack bags, and my maternity units, which was the number one super important thing. And all of that was in the car. And at this point I was on the toilet screaming and pushing, and sure enough, my waters broke. It was a gush of water. I think it's because I was pushing so hard at this point. I probably put so much force on the amniotic sac that the waters broke, the sac split. And so a gush of water fell out of me when I was on the toilet. Thank goodness I was on the toilet. And I also had my bloody show. So it was all happening in my bathroom, which is a delight. And my contractions were so frequent at this point, I couldn't get off the toilet to get dressed to then make my way down the stairs into the car to then be driven to the hospital. And Peter, oh, poor Peter, he just kept saying to me, Rita, we need to go to the hospital. Drugs are in the hospital. We need to get you to the hospital so that you can have the drugs, so that you can have the pain relief. And that's all that he kept saying. And I think in that moment in time, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And having him coax me through that helped me get in the car. Otherwise I wouldn't have made it down the stairs. I didn't even get dressed. I stayed in my PJs. I had a robe on, and that was it. It took me about half an hour, maybe even 40 minutes to get from my toilet downstairs into the car. And even on my driveway, before getting in the car, I was having contractions. I had to go down on all fours on my driveway and rock back and forth and breathe through it, because I just couldn't move. And as soon as you're in that contraction, your body just does its own thing. It's so strange. Then we finally get to the hospital, and because by now it was just gone 1 a.m. on the Saturday, and there were 2, I think, nurses that were having a break or changing shifts, and they were stood outside the front entrance of the hospital. And Peter kind of pulls up into a parking bay and was trying to kind of help me out the car. But at the time I was again going through another contraction. And by this point I was squatting in the middle of this car park on the tarmac and yelling and groaning and howling. And sure enough, these 2 nurses come running on over saying, oh my goodness, what's happening? And my partner goes, I think she's in labour. And they were like, okay. So they kind of hoist me up, haul me up, and kind of half drag me into the hospital. And I was taken up into the maternity unit. And even in the lift, going up 2 floors in the lift, I again had another contraction, and I was on all fours, rocking back and forth and howling. And they tried to grab me up as the lift door opened so that I wouldn't then get squished by the doors if another contraction was to come on. And then I get pulled onto the ward, and then they said, is this Rita? And I was like, yes, this is. And I'm like, oh, we've been expecting you. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. So they show me to my room, my labour room. But as I was walking, because they knew that I didn't need a chair or anything, and they gave me the first room in the ward, so with the least amount of walking. I had another contraction. I had to be just on all fours again, and I was literally within arm's reach of the front door of my labour room, but I couldn't get inside. I had another contraction, so again was on all fours, rocking back and forth and moaning and groaning. And I was in so much pain. Oh my goodness, cannot stress this enough. So much pain. And I had to just wait for the contraction to pass. And Peter at this point was like, Rita, you're almost there. Come on, we'll just get you in. And then the midwife was like, no, just let her have this contraction. And after she's had it, we'll quickly then get her onto the bed. And that's definitely what they did. So they waited for me to kind of go through the motions, have my contraction. As soon as it passed, they like, all of them kind of rushed me up onto the bed. I clambered onto the bed, laid on my back, and she was like, am I okay at this point to examine you? And my maternity notes say, no, I don't want any examinations. But I was like, yes, examine me, because I really wanted to know how far along I was, because I felt like no way could I be feeling this much pain and not be in active labour. I must be at least 4 centimetres, which I think is the classification of active labour. But remembering that the hospital, when we called them, was saying, no, your labour is going to take ages and all of that. Actually, when the midwife did examine me, she was like, oh my goodness, you're 9 centimetres. So I had done 9 centimetres on my own with no drugs, a little TENS machine, which kind of stopped working after the first hour anyway. It didn't really, I wouldn't say it stopped working. It didn't help me anymore after the first hour of me putting it on. Probably should have put it on a bit sooner in hindsight. But I'd done essentially 9 centimetres at home on my own, well, with Peter, but with no medical professionals there. And so I was 9 centimetres dilated, and at this point I was given gas and air. And Peter says, oh, can we have a water birth? It was in our birthing preferences to have a water birth. And the midwife was like, no, that's not going to happen. She said, the baby's going to come before we've had time to fill up the bath. The baby's here. It's going to be here very soon. And I was like, oh my goodness, are you serious? And then I half jokingly, this was when I was not in a contraction, I was half jokingly said, is it too late for an epidural? And she was like, yeah, definitely too late for an epidural. So kind of just went on the gas and air. That's all I had throughout the entire labour. And in my birthing notes, I did say that I wanted to be quite active. I wanted to be walking around, be like on a birthing ball and all of the things, like standing upright, let gravity kind of do its thing, work with me, help me with the labour. None of that happened. All of that went out the window. I was in a bed, lying on my back, with my legs up and pushing. Kind of like what you see in all the films. And it was not what I wanted at all, but that was the position that worked, because at one point, as I was trying to progress from 9 centimetres dilation to 10 centimetres, the midwife was like, do you want to flip over and be on your hands and knees, kind of lying over the bed? And I was like, okay, let's give that a go. So like, again, in between my contractions, I kind of quickly flipped on over to all fours, essentially. But if anything, that actually slowed down the labour. And I don't know why, because as I mentioned, with gravity working in your favour, that should kind of speed things up. But for me, it slowed down my contractions, and I felt it. My midwife had felt it. And after about 20 minutes of trying to be in that position, and it wasn't working for me, she was saying, oh, do you want to then flip back onto your back? Because she goes, that seems to work for you. And I was like, yeah, I think so too. And also it was a lot more tiring being on my hands and knees, because then I had to like keep up my own body weight as well. So for me, I ended up giving birth on my back with my legs in stirrups, as you see in all the typical films. But at 9 centimetres, I wasn't really progressing, and with every kind of push and contraction, I was bleeding a little bit. And when the midwife examined me again, she goes, it looks like there's a corner of my cervix was hooked on something inside of me, and it got caught on something. And she goes, I think I need to unhook it from whatever it's caught on so that I can fully dilate. because at that point, that's the thing that was stopping me from dilating. That's the thing that was stopping me from getting from 9 centimeters to the 10 centimeters fully dilated. And so I was like, yeah, fine, do it. And so what she had to do was, in between my contractions again, was put her hand in me to unhook it. And it didn't take long, it was like really quick. She did it really quickly, thank goodness, because it wasn't very comfortable. But that really helped speed up the process to getting to 10 centimeters dilated. And as soon as I was 10 centimeters dilated, I was pushing. I think, to be honest, I was kind of pushing from when I was on the toilet at home anyway, because that's what my body told me to do. And the midwife was really nice. She didn't tell me that, oh, don't push. She just was like, no, if your body's telling you to push, to do it, then do it, it's fine. And she was really understanding of that, which was really, really nice. So finally got to 10 centimeters and I was pushing. I was gripping onto Peter. He goes, I almost broke his thumb at one point because I was gripping so hard. He felt like there was no blood circulating in his hands, in his fingers. But he was there, and because I was breathing in the gas and air, my mouth and my lips, more so my mouth and my throat actually, got really, really dry. So in between my contractions, I kept on having like drinks to not have a dry throat. And the drink that I got, which was a Lucozade sport drink, it really, really helped. It was like sugary enough without being too sugary. It wasn't fizzy, and it probably gave me a bit more energy to kind of get me through the labour, which was good. So eventually, with all the pushing, the midwife finally saw the head, and she's like, wow, I can see the head. I was like, great, the head is almost out. I was like, how much of the head can you see? And the midwife goes, oh, I can see about this much. And I was like, are you serious? Just that much? I was thinking you could see the whole top of the head. And she goes, oh no, you'll need a few more pushes to get to that stage. I could literally, it was just this much. And she goes, do you want to see? And I was like, I don't know. And then I think she like brought a mirror. Yeah, I think she had a mirror, and she kind of placed it in between my legs so I could see the baby's head. And it was just that much. And I felt a bit let down. I felt a bit disappointed with all the work I'd been doing. I felt like the whole head should have been out by now. And then she goes to me, do you want to feel the head, the hair? And I was like, oh no, I don't want to be doing that. It'll be slimy. And she goes, no. And she kind of gently guided my hand down, and so I could touch the top of the baby's head. And sure enough, it was slimy, but it was a whole head of hair. I was like, oh my goodness, it's got so much hair. And she goes, yeah, your baby's got a full head of hair. I was like, wow. And so again, push, lots of pushing. And eventually I birthed the head. And it was strange because in the films, you see, oh, the head is born, and it kind of like the head is out, the body's inside of the mother still. And then they normally say, oh, with the next contraction, do one big push, and then the rest of the body comes out. But for me, for us, that wasn't the case. The head came out, and then literally within like half a second, the rest of the body kind of just slithered on out. And I think the midwife was a bit shocked at that. She kind of almost caught it like a rugby ball when the baby was born. And I was like, oh, it's all out of me. And I couldn't believe it. We had our baby, and they kind of put the baby straight on me for skin to skin. At this point, I was like trying to take off all my clothes because I was still wearing my PJs at this point. And they were trying to do skin to skin. And that was such a lovely, lovely moment. I can't stress that enough. It was so nice. So the baby was born at 3:48 a.m. and I was admitted into the hospital at 1:10, something like that, a.m. So it was a very, very quick birth. I mean, I did a lot of it at home, not knowing, as mentioned, I got to 9 centimetres at home. And I'm really grateful that I didn't actually end up giving birth at home, because with the whole corner of the cervix being stuck and everything else like that, that I would have just been a bloody mess. So yeah, baby was lying on me and we were doing skin to skin. And I think Peter was taking some photos at that point. But in my birthing preferences, which I was very surprised that the midwife even had time to read it through, I mentioned that I wanted Peter to announce the sex of the baby and also cut the umbilical cord. So the midwife kept saying to Peter, "So Dad, come on, what do we have? What do we have, boy or girl?" And Peter was just shell-shocked with the whole birth and how quickly the baby came out. Obviously, going through the contractions, it was still like a couple of hours, so that part wasn't fast. But from the head being born to the body being born, it was so quick. And he was just in shock and looking at me and looking at this baby. And the midwife just kept saying to him, "Come on, Dad, what do we have? A boy or a girl? What do we have, Dad?" And Peter just goes, bearing in mind, the whole way through the pregnancy, he thought we were going to have a boy because he thought he saw a penis in one of the scans, early on scans. And then he looks at the baby and he goes, "A girl?" And we caught that on camera, not his expression, but the tone of his voice. And it was the funniest thing. When we look back at that footage, we're like, the surprise in his voice was so true and authentic and real, and it was amazing. And I'm really, really glad he got to announce the sex. And he also got to cut the umbilical cord. The midwife goes to him, "Oh, cutting of the umbilical cord feels like cutting into juicy steak." And Peter goes, "It didn't feel like that at all. It felt like he was cutting into a gardening hose with scissors." And he goes, "Oh, it was like a rubbery texture. It wasn't like a juicy medium rare steak texture at all." So that's what happened. And then as I had the baby on me and we were doing to skin, I had the injection so that I could birth the placenta quickly. They put pressure on my stomach and to kind of push the placenta out, to help me push the placenta out. And then after they did that, there was a massive gush of fluid that came out of me. And at the time I thought, oh, that must be the rest of the amniotic fluid. And the midwives, there was 2 of them because they're kind of cleaning the baby up and everything else like that. They kind of jumped back. I remember this. They kind of jumped back and shuffled back, and they were like cleaning bits. And I was looking at Peter and we had the baby on me, and he just like looked at the nurses and then looked down at me. He's not very good. He doesn't have a good poker face. So he kind of looked a bit concerned, but I was just all absorbed in this baby, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have a baby. And then when the midwives were cleaning up all their utensils, and they have like the trays where they put all their utensils in, they took the tray away. And as they took the tray away, I then noticed the trays were full of blood. And that gush was not amniotic fluid. It wasn't the rest of my waters. It was blood. I had lost quite a lot of blood. When they soaked up everything and measured all the water, all the blood that I had lost, they kind of estimated it to roughly be about 1.1, maybe 1.2 litres of blood. And because of that, I then had to have a blood transfusion. They had to do a couple of different blood tests on me, which meant I had to stay 1 night in hospital and have a blood transfusion. And they gave me 2 bags of blood. I don't know how much that is. 2 pints of blood or 2 litres of blood? I don't know. 2 bags of blood, and because of that, I had to stay the night, which was really not what I wanted. I just wanted to go home. But at the same time, I knew I needed the blood. But because the hospital doesn't allow dads to be in the hospital overnight. Peter went home, and so I had to look after our newborn whilst being completely sore and drained of energy and drained of blood. But I had to look after the baby and attend to her and change her and feed her all by myself in the middle of the night. And the midwives, which were on duty on the ward that night, they were helpful, but I just felt bad because I really struggled to get in and out of bed, and then I had to shimmy myself on over to the baby to then feed her. So it was a bit of a struggle, I'm not gonna lie, not having Peter there for the first night, but hospital policy, you know, Peter couldn't stay, he had to go home, and that's fair enough. But yeah, I was discharged, we were discharged the following day. I remember placing the baby in her bassinet and thinking, oh my goodness, she's so small in her bassinet. And we had it right next to the bed, and we kind of just needed to kind of decide where things were going to go, like where the feeding station was going to go, like, and where the nappy station was going to go. We were still kind of sorting those things out in the first 1-2 days, but it was amazing. I can't believe we have a baby girl, and her name is Avery. We just still in shock over the whole thing, in delight, not shock as in bad, but it's hard to believe, like, you've waited 9 months for this baby to grow, and then you give birth. And I don't know, I just think for me anyway, a lot of my focus was on those 9 months and getting through the pregnancy, having had multiple miscarriages before. But then all my focus, especially towards the end of my 3rd trimester, was, oh my goodness, the birth. Because you never know what the birth is going to be like. And sure enough, her birth was nothing of what we planned. It wasn't a water birth. It wasn't a hypnobirth thing, kind of talking through the mantras and positive thinking. All of that went out the window, if I'm honest. But it's amazing that we finally have her. We have a new addition to the family. Fitzroy, our dog, has a little baby sister, and it's just a complete change. I will have to try and find some suitable footage to add to the end of this video, just to show clips of her being born and all of that. And we'll definitely have more content of her. I'll be doing more content, filming more things on baby products, baby reviews, what works, what doesn't work, at least for us in our situation. And I'll be sharing all of that with you. So that kind of wraps up today's video. It's quite a long one, but hopefully you found that interesting and entertaining. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell for more content from me. But until the next video, bye guys!